Welcome to the third part of this essay. Let's get straight into it. So, like paragraph 2 and paragraph 1, the overall structure stays the same. So, the 5 W's and a H structure, that is the exact same as before. The only difference is with paragraph 3, like paragraph 2, we're going to be using phrases that show the author is transitioning in their argument. So, in this case, these include phrases such as culminating in a final call to action, because usually that's what authors do by the end of their article. Also, phrases like this, the cyclical structure. So, this is talking about how Esther at the end of her piece is returning to something that she mentioned at the beginning of her piece, returning to an idea, a style, a tone, an audience that was being targeted at the beginning of her piece. In this case, it's a type of argument. So she's returning back to that community-minded argument that was present in the beginning of her piece. And that kind of brings it full circle for her article. As for the topic sentence, Astaire tries to encourage readers to share her excitement, and Morricone, like always, aims to refute this by revealing her true motives. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these analytical blocks here since they're using the same structure as before. So as an exercise, feel free to pause and have a look at where the who, what, when, where, why, how parts are for each of these segments. And that's good practice for you to get into when you're writing these essays because it's always good to check your essay first before giving it to, a teacher. Okay. One thing I will mention is a potential way to improve the efficiency of your writing. Because with the other two essays, so section A and section B, some people choose to memorize paragraphs or particular sections, and that's relatively easy compared to this because you at least know that it's going to be on those texts. Now, with argument analysis, you have no idea what the text or the article is going to be. So that makes it harder to memorize, but not impossible. For example, this part on inclusive phrases is something that I memorized. Not completely, but I'll show you what I mean. So let's go through what I would memorize here. It's very similar to a fill in the gaps exercise. The phrases I would memorize are through the repeated use of inclusive phrases such as insert the quote, which endeavors to impart a sense of solidarity amongst all audiences. Note that that part you can almost keep the same because the effect of inclusive phrases is very standard. It's always going to be that uniting the audience. And the good thing about this is it's specific enough to the technique, but not too generic. So it's like a definition of inclusive language. This is a nice in between medium that you can find. All right, continuing on, as such, they are likely to feel empowered to also, and then insert the purpose of this article. So that's obviously going to be different for each article, but you can use the verb empowered because that is a good verb to use for inclusive language. Hopefully that makes sense how I come up with these pre-prepared phrases because they can save you a lot of time. And one way to find these phrases is first, have a look at this essay, see if there's anything you can find that could work for other essays. But also, read over your past essays and any good sentences that you found there or your teacher said were good, try and use them again in new essays because that's how you can be more consistent. And hopefully that can reduce the amount of thinking time that you actually do in the exam or when you're writing an essay. That's definitely my best tip with how to write smart. Okay, moving on to Morricone. Again, the analysis here is quite standard, so I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I am going to mention about the visual analysis because I haven't done that yet. And a good technique to use, again, don't take it too rigidly, is something I call the SSS technique. So 3 S's. And what these 3 S's stand for are section, suggest, support. So, in other words, first identify a section of the visual that you're going to analyze. So in this case, I'm talking about the out of service sign, which is part of the visual. And then the next S, suggest. So what does this suggest? So in this case, it suggests how the store is not concerned about customer service, but only money, as you can see through the long rows of receipts. And the final S, support, how does this support the author's view? Well, you can see that I actually didn't include it as an extra sentence, but that's because I did it above. So I had this chunk here, and then I said this is supported by a visual. So you can do that as well. But basically, I'm saying that this supports the author's argument because it reveals how Astaire only cares about profit and not customers. So three S's, it's very important that last S support, you need to bring it back to the argument. It's good to know if you can analyze a visual well, but if you don't tie it back to argument, you won't actually get the marks. Okay, and then we have our links, just comparing the two purposes of the authors, not too complex. Okay, and then finally we have our conclusion. This is probably the thing that you can leave out if you don't have time. I actually didn't write my conclusion when I finished my argument analysis essay in the exam. I waited until I finished all other sections, and then if I had time, I would go back. Because for AA, so argument analysis, it's probably the least important. That doesn't mean that you should just ignore it, but if you don't have time, that's the first thing that you can leave out. But if you're wondering how I structure my conclusion, and again, this is not the only right way to do it, but I like to keep it short, so two sentences. First sentence, I summarize the author's main contention. And then secondly, I talk about how audiences may respond to the authors. That's it. So what were their main arguments and how may different audiences respond? So they might find favor with some audiences, but not with others. So hopefully that makes sense. Thanks for watching to the end, and I hope you found value in my analysis.